Back, everybody. Thanks for joining me in the record room today. My name is Doug. If you are new to the channel, hope everyone out there had a good Christmas, New Year's, holiday season. Pretty quiet one around here for me. The usual Christmas dinner runnings. But with Chinese New Year coming up on the horizon early in the new year as I record this, it put me in mind of a topic I tried to tackle in a video a couple of years ago. I did end up filming something, but wasn't quite satisfied with it, never ended up sharing it, and that is the subject of the Chinese Jamaicans who have helped shape reggae music, particularly in the crucial decades of the 1960s and 70s. Now, that subject may surprise some, given reggae's strong association with issues of blackness, African identity, repatriation to Africa, Rastafarianism, but in fact, Jamaica is an island of many different cultures, many ethnicities having come together. Its official motto, out of many, one people. And one of the groups that have made significant contributions to the music and the culture of the island is the Chinese Jamaicans. Now, in 1838, slavery was abolished on the island, leaving a labor shortage, particularly on the plantations dotting Jamaica. To fill this gap, the British authorities would import workers from other areas, particularly Chinese ones, the Chinese being thought to be hardy enough for the tough physical labor required on the plantations, and also inured to some extent to tropical diseases such as malaria. By 1854, boatloads of Chinese workers were beginning to arrive, 472, I believe, that year, one boatload alone. They would come from Panama, from other British Caribbean territories, as far afield as Hong Kong itself. These workers would be signed to multi-year terms of service, and once their contracts were expired, they were free to do as they wished. Many of them opting to remain on the island, begin new lives, marry, intermingle with other groups already present on the island, start families, start businesses, particularly retail ones. And over the years, the population growing, intermingling with the existing population of the island, until by the 1950s, it was estimated that Jamaicans of Chinese origin, either wholly or in part, controlled a large percentage of the supermarkets, the dry goods stores on the island, heavily represented in the retail sector of the island's economy. It was not without difficulties, challenges with the first anti-Chinese race riots beginning in 1918 and periodically thereafter. In the 1970s, given the political and economic instability of the island and in general, plus this kind of targeted racial violence, many Chinese would leave the island and start new lives again in Canada or the US. I used to work with the Chinese-Canadian girl myself, late 1990s, I guess. I was fairly new to reggae around there, and her family had lived in Jamaica at one point. She did not care much for reggae herself. Inevitably, these Chinese Jamaicans would begin to make their mark in the music scene once the modern Jamaican entertainment field began to develop. One of the springboards of the Jamaican music industry, what would evolve into reggae music down the line, was the development of the sound systems in the late 1940s. Sound systems were essentially mobile discos, turntables, speakers, amplifiers, growing ever more powerful through the 1950s and 60s, and capable of being set up at various locations, start playing music, attract people to their dances, where they would maybe pay a fee to get in, enjoy themselves, listen to some tunes, many people not not having a record player or even a radio in their homes at this time, maybe buy some food and drink while they were there. These sound systems often evolved out of advertising a business or a storefront, playing records to bring customers in. And given Chinese Jamaicans' strong representation in the retail sector, many of them would move into these sound systems. One of the first and most popular of the very early sound systems was run by Tom Tung Sue Wong. Tom Wong, known as Tom the Great Sebastian, what he named his sound system, named after a circus act, apparently. He had started playing records in his hardware shop in downtown Kingston. A very young street tough by the name of Prince Buster, apparently hanging out at the shop and playing records as well. Eventually, Tom would progress to playing records at other locations. On one occasion, he was inadvertently flopped when he was playing at a location across the street from an electronics shop run by RAF-trained electronics technician Headley Jones, who had the most advanced amplifiers on the island. All the people in the area gravitating to Headley Jones's shop, leaving Tom Wong's dance poorly attended. Tom summarily commissioning his own amplifiers to be built, boosting his power and capabilities, more clarity, more punch to his audio, capable of bringing more people into the dances. Tom's popularity grew through the 1950s. Around 1950, he would bring in Duke Vin as selector on his system, playing the records. He would also have what some consider the first DJ or talk over artist, entertaining the crowd with his chatter over the records on the microphone, Count Machuki. Count Machuki, seen there in the old Rough Guide to Reggae book, some of his recollections about his time with Tom the Great Sebastian. On one occasion, Count Machuki defeating another sound called Nick the Champ with his superior selection of records. Another time at the storied Foresters Hall, while Tom was away on a bathroom break, Count Machuki defeating a rival sound in the space of time it took for Tom to come back. Count Machuki, pioneering early DJ, did not make very many records. Duke Vin himself, who stuck to selecting the records to be played, would immigrate to the UK about 1954 and found the very first sound system there, but he himself had got his start with Chinese Jamaican Tom Wong, aka Tom the Great Sebastian. As the sound system field began to proliferate, get more competitive, the rivalries between the sounds began to heat up, increasingly moving into underhanded or even violent tactics against each other. Tom Wong had little interest in that kind of competition. He just wanted to play records for his patrons. He was known as a gentleman and a professional, and facing increasing pressure, he would eventually move his operations to a more sedate area of town around the Silver Slipper Club and begin to fade from prominence a bit as more powerful, more popular sound systems came in the 1950s, particularly the big three of Sir Coxsone Downbeat, Duke Reid the Trojan, and King Edwards, who took over most of the sound system traffic. Unfortunately, facing personal and professional setbacks, Tom would take his own life in 1971. The sound carried on for a while by one of his selectors, Lou Gooden, before eventually being sold off and later renamed Metro Media, becoming popular all over again in the 1980s. Unlike some of the later sound system operators, Tom never transitioned into producing records of his own, just played them, leaving no tangible evidence of his activities, but he was a pioneering Chinese Jamaican sound system owner. Not the only one. There were other Chinese Jamaican sounds, such as Cavaliers, I believe, Admiral Chin's, Mellow Canary, run by a Mr. Chung, but Tom, the Great Sebastian, was one of the first and most popular. One of the first Chinese Jamaicans who did leave a tangible trace of their music activities was Ivan S. Chin. Like many who would follow him, he was of mixed heritage, Chinese on his father's side, Indian on his mother's. He had taken an electronics correspondence course, had spent some time in New York City, and in the 1940s founded Chin's radio service in downtown Kingston, a radio repair shop, sold electronics parts and components, including to some of the sound systems as they started setting up. Also sold a few records, some Calypso and Mento, the Jamaican cousin of Calypso, to tourists looking to bring home a souvenir of their trip to Jamaica back home with them. One day in the early 1950s, he was approached by a local Calypso group to record their band, record some songs with them. He would purchase a recording console from businessman Ken Curry, who had been doing much the similar thing. Another businessman, Stanley Mata, also recording at this time. One of Ivan Chin, at this time, one of the very few with recording capabilities on the island, and again, showcasing the ethnic diversity of the island. Ken Curry, of Lebanese background, I believe. Stanley Mata, Jewish. And Ivan S. Chin, Chinese Jamaican, with some Indian in the mix. Ivan Chin would begin recording songs with the Calypso group, which he renamed Chin's Calypso Sextet, cutting them directly to 78 RPM, 10-inch shellac discs on various labels through the 1950s. Recorded about 80 to 100 sides. I've heard the tally mentioned. Many very rare nowadays, given the fragile nature of the 78s, the 10-inch shellac discs. Many typical Mento and Calypso songs. One, however, that was very unusual was by a Calypsonian called Lord Lebby, born Noel Williams, was a song called Ethiopia, referencing in a coded way the Rastafarian homeland of Ethiopia, looking to repatriation back to Africa, with very prescient lyrics that would become much more prevalent in Jamaican music more than a decade later, but in 1955 were very rare. Some of the very first Rasta-oriented lyrics ever committed to disc on Jamaica. And that song, Lord Lebby, Ethiopia, can be found on the 2015 Soul Jazz compilation Rastafari, The Dreads Entered Babylon, Lord Lebby and the Jamaican Calypsonians with Ethiopia, with some lyrics that would later be echoed in much better known Jamaican songs later on. They're not skylarking, they're only talking about Ethiopia. It takes behavior to be a savior in Ethiopia. Meanwhile, some other Ivan Chin, mento, and calypso productions can be found on the 2006 Pressure Sounds compilation, Take Me to Jamaica, compilation of early mento recorded in Jamaica in the 1950s, includes a fair few produced by Ivan Chin, as well as Stanley Mata and Ken Curry, the founding fathers of the Jamaican recording industry. Pressure Sounds compilation of mento. As the calypso and mento fad began to die down in the late 1950s, Ivan Chin would curtail his recording activities. He would have a last flourish of influence in the 1960s, early 1970s, when he gave a first job to a young Lloyd James, later to be known as Prince Jammy. His mother got him the job in the repair shop, and he would go on to be the understudy of King Tubby and make a massive name for himself as a reggae producer, dub mixer, but got his very first electronics job with Ivan Chin. Another would be Pat Kelly, one of the great singers of Jamaican music, who had a sideline in mixing and engineering. He also worked at Chin's radio repair shop. Ivan Chin himself would emigrate to Canada, the Toronto area, I believe, by about 1974, joining that exodus of Chinese Jamaicans leaving the island during the turbulent decade of the 1970s. He would found more electronics shops in the Toronto area in the 1970s, later reissue some of his productions on handmade CDRs. Lesser known, but made a significant contribution to the Jamaican music industry. Thanks for watching, everybody. My look at the prominent Chinese Jamaicans of reggae music will continue in the next video.